Hi, and welcome to the Sermon Audio Podcast from Sunbury United Methodist Church in Sunbury, Ohio. If you're still learning about us, we would encourage you to stick around for some more information about who we are and what we do at the end of today's message. But for now, let's hop right into today's teaching.
Luke 2:41 through 52 says this: Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Amen. Let's welcome up Pastor Gordon. And at this time, all of the kids that are preschool age through entering second grade in the fall, you may join Miss Heidi in the back and head over to story time.
Well, good morning. Great. Wasn't the praise team incredible? I mean, they were really. I mean, they're inviting us to worship, and they're using their gifts and talents to draw us in, so that we might have that type of relationship with God. And for that, we need to be very thankful. So I'm fascinated with stories. Is anybody else fascinated with stories? Yeah, a story or two. Anybody ever told a story about you? You see, when our family gets together, we know that there's going to be some old tale that's going to be dusted off. And next thing you know, you'll hear a phrase or a line, something like this: "Hey, do you guys remember the time when?" And then, well, the story begins. And as the story is being told, oftentimes there'll be a little extra humor inside the story, a little playfulness about the event that transpired or didn't transpire. And sometimes that family member may feel a little embarrassment as their old stories are shared and reshared. You know, I can remember this time when I'll tell you one of our family stories, and it's told quite frequently. Our middle son, as he was getting ready for his prom, we told him, "Hey, Joshua, the girls often like a corsage." And he says, "Got it, Dad, got it." And so he went off to the flower shop, came back, and I went to get a snack in the refrigerator, and here were these plastic flowers in the refrigerator. And so I asked him, "Hey, Josh, why'd you put these plastic flowers? They don't need to be in the fridge." And he says, "Well, Dad, every time you've bought flowers for Mom, they went in the fridge." And so we tell that story over and over in our family, and sometimes there's a little extra things added to it, and so on and so forth. I can tell you that I don't know how many people have heard this story about me. Story about baby Gordon. That my parents were they were church-going folk. Every time the church doors were open, they were there. And they were married young. My mom was 16, my dad was 18 when they got married. And so when I came along, they turned around and wanted to bring me to their church family, the first possible moment. That's what they did. Small country church. Everybody was family. And so you can imagine as they walked in the door and there was baby Gordon being carried in, and all the ladies started oohing and ahhing, not because I was incredible or anything like that. They were just oohing and ahhing at a baby. And next thing you know, can I hold him? And so this lady had me, and then the next thing it was shared with another lady, and next thing it was Aunt so-and-so. And before you know it, my parents were footloose and fancy free. I mean, they were catching up on all the news in the church, and they were catching up with their friends and so on and so forth. And the service went by. They didn't care one bit about where I was at until the service was over and they were catching up out in the parking lot. The pastor had turned the lights off, locked the door, and was getting ready to start the car. And my mom looked at my father and said, Bill, you got Gordon? And my mom turned around and said, well, Barbara, I thought he was with you. And then they realized they better stop the minister before he left the building. And there I had been left in the church on a pew. Yeah, I heard that story a lot, and so did a lot of other people. You see, I think that's a little bit what our scripture kind of feels like this morning. A tale of Jesus, a 12-year-old that had been left behind in Jerusalem as the family traveled back to Nazareth right after that wonderful, incredible high church experience of Passover, that festival. If you go through the Gospels, you don't hear much about Jesus after his birth. You don't hear anything about his childhood. In fact, this is about the only story that we catch of Jesus midstream between his birth and his baptism into ministry as an adult. And Luke's the only one that tells it. The rest is left up to your and my imagination. Wondering, was Jesus a well-behaved baby and a child? Oh, did he throw temper tantrums from time to time? And what was his favorite game as a child? Did Jesus make mistakes, just like everyone else? And did he ever come to those moments to where he had to debate internally and struggle with what was right and wrong and what he should do? Or did he just know? A lot of this is left up to our imaginations, my friends. But then we have this one story to where we're painted a picture of a devout Jewish family that makes this annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And they make it with their extended family and their friends in order to celebrate this wonderful gift that God had given their people, the gift of freedom from slavery in Egypt. This journey takes about 4 or 5 days each way. So once a year, they would commit this 2-week period of time to travel back and forth. And it also included considerable financial commitment on their part. But that didn't seem to matter to them because it was their tradition to go and to go to Jerusalem and to thank God for what God had done for their people. It was the central hub of the faith, and the culture was there that invited people to be a part of thanking God. I can imagine in the earlier years, Jesus going to Jerusalem and almost being like summer camp for our youth. And yet at this point in time, we have this story of Jesus. Now, we could get into some of the details of the story and probably be okay. I can imagine that Mary and Joseph having this conversation about how they could possibly have traveled a whole day without realizing Jesus, their only son, wasn't with them. Anybody seen that movie, Home Alone? Yeah, kind of like that. Halfway to Paris. And next thing you know, they say, you got so-and-so? Where's he at? And then we could get into the blame game. You know, Mary, you're responsible for them. Well, no, Joseph, be the father here now. Come on. And we could get into those weeds and those details, but I don't believe that's what Luke is trying to teach us. This is the main developmental task that Luke is wanting us to understand. Discovering Jesus' own identity. Coming to grips with who he is. That moment in time when we say, you know what? I'm Gordon Myers. I'm no longer the son of. It's that time when we start to develop our relationship with our peers and with the world all around us. It's that moment when we begin to look at the world as a place that's filled with challenges as well as opportunities to make a difference. It's that time when we turn around and we say, you know, you have to find your way in life. And so I find it interesting that Luke tells us the story and leaves us guessing to whether Jesus intentionally stayed behind or whether he was left behind. I believe Jesus' response to his mother's question when they finally found him in the temple sounds like he's not too remorseful about being there in Jerusalem while everyone's going home. It almost sounds like he stayed back on purpose by saying, you know, it would have been easy. You should have known that I would be in my Father's house. Where else would I be? It's my identity. Big questions. Now, you and I know how the story ends, my friends. We know that Jesus would continue to grow in grace and in obedience. We know that the story tells us that Jesus' identity became one that cared for the whole world. It made no difference who they were. It made no difference. We wouldn't be gathered here if we didn't know what the outcome was. But I believe the story in Luke is more about you and me, about those in the early church, about Luke saying, folks, when you read this, think about your life. It leaves me, after reading and studying and praying and thinking about this story, it leads me to wonder about my own identity. I believe the story leads us to ask about our identity. No matter how young we are, or no matter how many decades we have under our belts, we should always be developing who we are. And added to that, who we belong to. I know that in our 44 years of marriage, I have developed in who I am as a husband, who I am as a father. It's always growing and always changing. Living out the purpose of what we're to be about, what kind of influence we're to be making in our spheres of influence. Living out the purpose of what we are called to do and who we are called to be. So this morning I want to ask a very simple question. The question is for you, and it's for me as well. Where in the world are you? Where are you choosing to be? And even a more serious question is this: Who are you choosing to be? I guess what I'm asking this morning is this. Are you willing to take a serious look at your life and a serious look at the decisions that you have made and are making for the next stage of your life? Are you spending your time in the places that foster that healthy spiritual growth and development? Are you listening for where God is calling you? Calling you to grow. Calling you to stretch in the way that you do things. Are you listening for the way that God might be asking you to use your unique gifts and personality to serve others? You see, it's my prayer this morning that this will be a time when you can look back and you can say, I remember that day that I chose to be like Jesus. I remember that day when I chose to live like Jesus. Or maybe you can look back and you can say, I remember that Sunday morning so well. My heart was so warmed and my life was so changed that from that moment, I remember that I choose to be a person that let my life be lived as a blessing for others because I choose to identify myself with Jesus Christ. Would you just take a moment and I ask you just to close your eyes and spend that brief moment with God. No one's going to ask you to do anything. This is your time to say, Most Holy God, I might not be where I want to be. Please help me.
Thanks for listening to this sermon audio. Our church is located in Sunbury, Ohio, just northeast of the greater Columbus metro area. We've often been called the Church at the Crossroads due to our location at the corner of State Routes 3 and 37 in the heart of our community. If you're ever able to come visit us, you will find that we're passionate about loving God and serving all people. We would love for you to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at SunburyUMC. You can also visit our website at SunburyUMC.org. We hope you'll tune back in for more of our teachings, and if you're ever in town, we'd love to see you.